The arrow struck my shoulder and I felt the iron point grind against bone, white-hot agony that stole my breath and nearly drove me to my knees. I staggered against the ancient wooden gate behind me. The Gate of Lions, they called it. The last entrance to the sacred gardens where pilgrims had walked for 1,000 years before we came, where Christ himself was said to have prayed on the night before his death. Blood ran down my arm, soaking into the white surcoat that marked me as a knight of the temple, and I could hear them coming. The Saracen warriors who had already taken the outer walls, who had slaughtered the garrison, who now wanted only to breach this final gate and desecrate the holy ground I had sworn to protect. I was alone. Every other brother had fallen in the defense of the fortress, their bodies cooling in the courtyard behind me, their prayers ended, their service complete, and I stood here bleeding, with nothing but a failing body and an unbreakable vow between the enemy and the sacred space I would not surrender. The first warrior appeared around the corner of the wall, his scimitar already raised, and I lifted my sword with my one good arm and prepared to meet him, knowing this was the day I would die but refusing to die before my duty was fulfilled. My name is Brother Simon of Aquitaine, and I was 47 years old on the morning I took my position at the Gate of Lions, already ancient by the standards of warriors in the Holy Land, already marked by scars from 2 decades of combat in service to the Order. I had joined the temple at 23, a young man filled with certainty about God and righteousness and the clarity of our mission in Outremer. I had been neither the strongest nor the fastest of my training cohort, but I possessed something that compensated for physical limitations, an absolute stubbornness, a refusal to yield or retreat or accept defeat that my commanders recognized as valuable in ways that mere strength could never be. They assigned me to the fortress of Bethany, a small stronghold built around the ancient gardens where tradition held that Jesus had spent his final night in prayer, where pilgrims came to walk the paths he had walked and to pray in the grotto, where he had wept for the suffering he knew awaited him. Our mission was simple: protect the pilgrims who journeyed here, maintain the sanctity of the holy ground, ensure that this sacred place remained accessible to those who sought to draw closer to God by walking where he had walked. For 24 years I served at Bethany without complaint, without seeking glory or advancement, content to fulfill my duty in this quiet corner of the Holy Land. I escorted pilgrims through dangerous territory, stood watch on the walls, maintained the gardens with my own hands when the local workers fled during times of violence. I grew to love this place in ways I had never loved anything else. The ancient olive trees that had witnessed centuries, the stone paths worn smooth by countless feet, the silence of the grotto where I could almost feel the presence of something greater than myself, some echo of the divine that made my faith feel less like belief and more like direct experience. Other brothers cycled through the fortress, served their time, and moved on to more important postings. But I remained, became part of the landscape, the knight who had grown old guarding a gate that rarely needed defending. Young brothers who arrived fresh from France sometimes looked at me with pity, seeing my gray hair and my scarred hands and my simple contentment with unremarkable service, assuming I had been relegated to this backwater posting because I lacked the ability for more important work. They did not understand that I had chosen this, that I had requested to remain at Bethany even when offered positions elsewhere, that guarding these gardens was not punishment, but privilege. The war that would end everything began 3 years before the morning I took my final stand at the gate. Saladin had consolidated his power, united the Saracen forces under his command, and launched a coordinated campaign to reclaim the territories Christians had held for nearly a century. Fortress after fortress fell, great strongholds that had seemed impregnable, garrisons of hundreds of knights overcome by armies of thousands. We watched the tide of conquest approaching, knew our turn would come eventually, prepared as best we could with our small garrison of 30 brothers and 50 men-at-arms. Brother Commander Matthias, who had led Bethany for a decade, called us together in the chapel and spoke with characteristic bluntness. We cannot hold against a determined assault. Our walls are old, our numbers too few, our position too isolated for reinforcement to reach us in time. When they come, and they will come, we will fight with everything we have, but we will fall. The question is what we do with the time we have before that day arrives. I propose we use it to ensure the gardens are protected, to make arrangements for the holy ground to be preserved even if we cannot preserve ourselves. We spent those 3 years preparing for our inevitable defeat, but not in the way warriors typically prepare. We did not simply strengthen our defenses or stockpile weapons, though we did those things as well. We also met with Saracen emirs who controlled the surrounding territory, negotiated agreements that the gardens would be respected as holy ground regardless of who controlled the fortress, secured promises that pilgrims would still be allowed to visit even after we were gone. It was strange work for Templar knights, this diplomacy with enemies, these negotiations over terms of our own defeat. But Brother Matthias insisted it was the most important service we could provide. Our lives are temporary, he told us. These gardens are eternal. We serve God by ensuring they remain accessible to those who seek Him, whether those seekers are Christian or Muslim or anything else. That service matters more than our pride, more than dying gloriously in futile defense of walls that will fall regardless of how bravely we fight. Some brothers struggled with this approach, wanting to fight to the last man rather than negotiate with enemies, but I understood what Matthias was doing, recognized it as wisdom rather than weakness. The assault came on a spring morning, Saladin's forces surrounding our fortress with overwhelming numbers, their siege engines already assembled, their commanders clearly intending to take Bethany quickly and move on to more important targets. Brother Matthias gathered us one final time in the chapel and we prayed together, and then he gave his final orders. We will defend the walls as long as we can. We'll give the enemy a fight worthy of our vows. But when the walls fall, and they will fall, we retreat to the inner courtyard, and we make our stand there. All except Brother Simon. He turned to look at me, his eyes holding something I could not quite name. Simon, you will take position at the Gate of Lions. You will hold that gate against all who try to breach it. You will not retreat, will not surrender, will not allow anyone to pass into the gardens while you still draw breath. This is not punishment, brother. This is the most important duty I can give you. The agreements we made, the promises we secured, they all depend on the gardens remaining inviolable during the battle, on no blood being spilled on that sacred ground. You must hold the gate. Can you do that? I met his eyes and I did not hesitate. I can, I said. I will. The battle for the outer walls lasted 4 hours, brutal and desperate. Our small garrison fighting with courage that would have been admirable if it had made any difference to the outcome. I watched from my position at the Gate of Lions, as brothers I had lived beside for years fell one by one, as our defenses were overwhelmed, as the courtyard filled with enemy warriors. I wanted to join them, to die fighting alongside my brothers rather than standing alone at this gate. But my orders were clear and my vows demanded obedience. So I stood, and I watched, and I prayed for their souls as they fell. And when the last brother died and the fortress was fully taken, when Saracen warriors turned their attention to the gate I guarded, I raised my sword and prepared to fulfill the duty I had been given. The first warrior who approached was young, his face eager, his blade already stained with the blood of my brothers. He came at me confidently, expecting easy victory over a single aging knight, and I met him with techniques I had practiced for 2 decades, with economy of motion born from knowing my own limitations, with strikes that were not powerful, but were precise. I killed him efficiently, without drama, and his body fell at my feet as a second warrior took his place. They came at me one at a time at first, each warrior apparently believing he would be the one to get past the old knight guarding the gate. I killed them methodically, using the narrow space to my advantage, making them fight in conditions that favored defense over attack, giving ground only in inches, never allowing them to flank me or overwhelm me with numbers. My sword grew heavy in my hand, my arm ached with exhaustion, sweat ran into my eyes and mixed with blood from wounds I barely felt. But I held my position because holding it was all I had left, was the entire purpose of my existence in those hours. A Saracen officer finally called his men back, apparently deciding that spending warriors one at a time against a single stubborn knight was poor strategy. And I stood alone in the momentary silence, gasping for breath, counting the bodies at my feet. 8 men dead, 8 families who would mourn, 8 souls sent to whatever judgment awaited them. I did not feel triumph at having killed them, felt only grim recognition that more would come, that eventually I would tire or be wounded seriously enough that I could no longer defend myself, that my stand here was temporary no matter how determined I was to make it permanent. The arrow that struck my shoulder came from a rooftop, shot by an archer who had found an angle I could not defend against. The pain was immediate and consuming, radiating from the wound through my entire body, and I knew from the way the arrow had struck that the damage was serious, that my right arm would soon be useless. I broke off the shaft with my left hand, leaving the iron point embedded in the bone because pulling it free would only worsen the bleeding, and I transferred my sword to my left hand, adjusting my grip, compensating for the weakness I now carried. 3 warriors came at me together this time, apparently believing that a wounded knight with his sword in his offhand would be easy prey. They learned otherwise. I had trained with both hands as all Templar knights did, had spent years practicing precisely for situations like this, and while I was slower with my left hand than my right, I was still capable enough to kill all 3 before they could breach the gate. But the effort cost me, left me swaying on my feet, my vision darkening at the edges, my body beginning to fail in ways I could not ignore or overcome through will alone. A voice called out in Arabic, and the warriors pulled back again, forming a half circle around my position but making no move to attack. A man in rich armor pushed through their ranks, his bearing marking him as someone of authority, and he addressed me in careful French. "Knight of the Temple, you have fought with honor. You have done your duty and more, but you are wounded, exhausted, alone. Your brothers are dead, your fortress is taken, your cause is lost. Lower your sword and accept quarter. I give you my word you will be treated with respect. Your wounds will be tended, your life will be spared. There is no shame in accepting reality when reality cannot be changed." I understood what he was offering: mercy, survival, the chance to live beyond this day. And I understood what accepting would mean: abandoning my post, surrendering the gate, allowing Saracen warriors to enter the gardens I had sworn to protect. I thought of Brother Matthias's final order, of the agreements we had made, of the promise that the gardens would remain inviolate during the battle. If I surrendered now, if I stepped aside, that promise would be broken, and everything we had worked for would be lost. "I cannot accept your offer," I said, my voice rough but steady. "I have been given a duty, and that duty does not end simply because fulfilling it has become difficult. I will hold this gate until I fall, and I will not permit anyone to pass while I still draw breath. That is not stubbornness or pride, Commander. That is simply what my vows require, what my faith demands, what honor means when honor is more than just a word we speak to make ourselves feel righteous. Come at me one at a time or all together, the result will be the same. I will fight until I can no longer fight, and this gate will remain closed." The commander studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then nodded slowly and withdrew. He called orders in Arabic, and I watched as his warriors began to form up for what I knew would be the final assault, the overwhelming attack that would sweep past my failing defenses and end my stand. I shifted my grip on my sword, settled my weight as best I could with my wounded body, and I began to pray aloud, speaking the words of Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul." But the assault did not come. Instead, the Saracen commander raised his hand, and his warriors stopped, confusion visible on their faces as he countermanded his own order. He walked forward alone, stopping just beyond the reach of my sword, and he spoke with unexpected gentleness. "I know this place, knight. I know these gardens. Know they are sacred to your people. Know that Christ walked here before his death. My faith honors Christ as a prophet, reveres the places where he lived and prayed. I gave my word to your commander that these gardens would be preserved, that no blood would be spilled here, that pilgrims would still be welcome regardless of who held the fortress. I intended to honor that word, but I did not account for finding a knight like you, a man so committed to his duty that he will die rather than abandon his post. You have created a problem for me, do you understand? If I order my men to take this gate, they will kill you, and your blood will be spilled on holy ground, breaking the very agreement I seek to uphold. If I leave you here, you will continue to deny us entry, and I cannot have a single stubborn knight preventing access to a place that should be open to all who seek God." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something, then spoke with decision. "I will make you an offer, knight, and I ask that you consider it seriously before refusing. My men will withdraw from this gate. You may remain at your post as long as you wish, fulfilling your duty, holding your position. When you finally collapse from your wounds, when you can no longer stand, and that moment is coming soon, we both know this, my men will carry you to our physicians, will tend your wounds, will ensure you survive. And then, when you have healed, you may go free. No ransom, no imprisonment, no conditions except this. You tell others what happened here. You tell them that Saladin's commanders honor sacred places, that we kept our word about preserving these gardens, that we showed mercy to an enemy who showed courage. Will you accept these terms?" I understood what he was offering, understood the political calculation behind his apparent generosity, but I also understood that his offer genuinely honored the spirit of what we had been trying to achieve, that it preserved the sanctity of the gardens while allowing me to maintain my duty until my body failed. "I accept," I said quietly. "I will hold this gate until I fall, and I will tell others what you have done here." He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect between warriors, and withdrew his forces. I stood at the Gate of Lions for another 3 hours, watching the sun move across the sky, feeling my strength slowly drain away through the wound in my shoulder, and through simple exhaustion that my will could no longer overcome. I prayed continuously, not for rescue or relief, but for the strength to remain standing, to fulfill my duty completely, to keep my post until my body absolutely could not continue. Brothers came to me in my delirium, men I had served beside, friends long dead, even Brother Matthias, who had given me this final order. They stood with me in silence, offering comfort I could not quite feel, but appreciated nonetheless. And when I finally collapsed, when my legs gave out and I fell to my knees and then to my side, when darkness took me and I surrendered consciousness, my last thought was not of regret or pain, but of simple satisfaction that I had done what I had promised to do, that I had held my post until the end, that the gate had not been breached while I could still prevent it. I woke in a tent that smelled of herbs and incense, my shoulder bound with clean linen, my body weak but no longer actively dying. A Saracen physician sat beside me, and when he saw I was conscious, he offered water and spoke in broken French. "You live, knight. Your wound was serious but not fatal. You will recover, though your sword arm may never regain full strength. The commander wishes to speak with you when you are able." 2 days later, when I could stand without assistance, I was brought before the same commander who had offered me terms at the gate. He received me with courtesy, offered me food and wine, and spoke with genuine interest about my service, about why I had been willing to die for a simple gate, about what the gardens meant to me. I answered his questions honestly, told him about the 24 years I had spent at Bethany, about my love for the ancient olive trees and the silent grotto, about my belief that some places are sacred regardless of who controls them, that preserving access to such places is service to God more important than any military victory. He listened carefully, then told me something I had not known. "Your commander, Brother Matthias, negotiated terms with us before the battle. He knew you could not win, knew the fortress would fall, but he cared deeply that the gardens be preserved. We gave our word they would be, that pilgrims would still be welcome, that no desecration would occur, and we have kept that word, knight. The gardens remain open, protected, sacred. Your stand at the gate helped us honor our commitment. By fighting as you did, by refusing to surrender, you ensured that no Saracen warrior entered the gardens in the heat of battle, that no violence occurred on that holy ground. You did exactly what your commander needed you to do. He would be proud." Tears ran down my face as I heard those words, understanding finally that my stand had not been futile, that Brother Matthias had known exactly what he was doing when he gave me that final order, that my willingness to die holding that gate had served a purpose larger than my own understanding. "May I see them?" I asked. "The gardens. May I visit them one final time before I leave?" The commander smiled. "Of course. They are open to all who seek God, remember? That includes aging Templar knights who guarded them so faithfully. He had me escorted to the gardens the next morning, and I walked the familiar paths I had maintained for so many years, touched the ancient olive trees, knelt in the grotto where silence seemed to hold the presence of something holy. The gardens were unchanged, undamaged, still sacred despite the battle that had raged around them. Pilgrims were already returning, both Christian and Muslim, I noticed, people of different faiths drawn to a place where they believed God was somehow more accessible, more present, more real than in other locations. I sat beneath my favorite olive tree, and I wept again, not from sadness but from overwhelming gratitude that my service had mattered, that my stand had preserved something worth preserving, that I had been permitted to fulfill my vows in the most complete way possible. After an hour, the guards who had escorted me indicated it was time to leave, and I rose and walked slowly from the gardens, looking back one final time at the Gate of Lions where I had made my stand, where I had held my post until my body failed, where I had discovered what it truly meant to serve faithfully regardless of outcome. They released me as promised, gave me safe passage to Christian territory, asked only that I tell others what I had witnessed, that Saladin's commanders honored their word, that sacred places were preserved, that mercy was shown to enemies who showed courage. I kept that promise, told my story to any who would listen, testified that our enemies were not monsters but men who could act with honor and wisdom. Some brothers in the order believed I was a fool for praising Saracens, for acknowledging that our enemies were capable of virtue, but I spoke only truth as I had witnessed it, and truth seemed more important than maintaining comfortable prejudices about the righteousness of our cause and the wickedness of theirs. I lived another 15 years after my stand at the gate, serving in various Templar houses, never returning to combat but making myself useful in other ways, carrying the memory of Bethany in the gardens and the duty I had been permitted to fulfill. I am an old man now, past 60, my sword arm still weak from the wound I took at the Gate of Lions, my body marked by decades of service in the Holy Land. The order itself is dying, destroyed not by Saracen warriors but by Christian kings who coveted our wealth, by a pope who lacked the courage to defend us, by lies and fabrications that proved more effective than any military assault. Soon there will be no more Templar knights, no more white mantles, no more brotherhood dedicated to defending pilgrims and protecting holy places. But the gardens at Bethany remain, I am told, still sacred, still accessible, still maintained by those who understand that some places transcend politics and warfare and the rise and fall of kingdoms. That knowledge gives me peace as I approach my own end, knowing that what I fought to preserve has survived, that my stand at that gate mattered in ways that will outlast the order and its dissolution, and all the temporal concerns that seem so important in the moment, but fade to nothing across the sweep of years. I was a lone Templar knight who guarded a sacred gate and held it until the end. That is my story, my legacy, my answer to those who ask what I did with my life. I did not win great battles or earn fame or accomplish deeds that would be recorded in histories. I simply stood at my post when standing was required, refused to abandon my duty when abandoning would have been easier, kept my vows when keeping them cost me everything I had to give. And in doing that simple thing, in being faithful to the task I was given regardless of whether that faithfulness would be recognized or rewarded or even remembered, I discovered what service truly means, what honor requires when honor is more than just words, what faith demands when faith is tested by circumstances that seem designed to break us. The gate has long since rotted away, I am certain, replaced by newer construction, forgotten by all except those who study old records and wonder about the battle fought there. But the gardens remain, and that is enough. That has always been enough. Non nobis Domine, non nobis sed nomini tua da gloriam. Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but to thy name give glory. I lived these words at that gate, proved them true through my stand, discovered that giving glory to God sometimes means dying alone, defending something that matters to no one except Him, and the few who understand that sacred places are worth preserving regardless of cost. I held my post. I kept my vows. I served faithfully until my body could serve no longer. That is my offering, my life's work, my testimony that duty and honor and faith are not abstract concepts but concrete choices made in specific moments when those choices cost us everything we value. The gate was held. The gardens were preserved. That is enough. It has always been enough, and it will be enough when I die and face whatever judgment awaits. When I stand before God and He asks what I did with the life He gave me. When I answer simply, I held my post. Lord, I kept my promises. I guarded the gate. You asked me to guard until I could guard it no longer. Please let that be sufficient. Please let that simple faithfulness count for something in your eyes, even if it counted for nothing in the eyes of the world.